Hey, what's up? You are now listening to another episode of the Grow Up Podcast, and I am your host, Minister Tasha. I'm excited about this podcast. I'm excited about this episode. You know, I often spend time in prayer, asking God, what's next? What's the next conversation that you want me to have? And I want you to know that a lot of prayer goes into each and every single episode. I don't just press record and start talking, but I spend time preparing, and I am appreciative of every single person that listens week in and week out. I want to say thank you. I appreciate you. And I hope that you're being blessed by this, right? I'm not doing this because I just want to sit and talk or listen to myself talk. You know, for those that know me personally, if I had my way, I would stay in the background. But I do this every single week out of obedience to God. And again, I pray that you are blessed by the content, by the episodes that are released. I want to go ahead and get into today's episode, but I need to set some context to today's conversation. For those of you that follow my personal Instagram page, you know that I do a show every single Friday at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with my big sis who was on the show recently. But we have a show that we do on Instagram Live. And one night we decided to talk about what do you do while you're waiting for God to answer a question. And there were some things covered that I believe need to be fleshed out a little bit more. And that's what I'm going to do on this particular episode. I want to ask the question, what do you do while you're waiting on God to answer your prayer? Whatever that prayer is, the question remains, what do you do while you're waiting for an answer? Maybe you've been praying and asking God for another job. Maybe you've been praying and asking God to show you what's next in your life, and you're waiting and you've been waiting for the answer, but you feel stuck. So again, the question is, what do you do? Do you just drop your head and say, oh, well, forget it. God hasn't answered, so maybe he isn't going to answer. What do you literally do? I know that we often say that we have to wait on the Lord, and I absolutely agree with that. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is going to answer that particular prayer request in his own timing, but sometimes it gets hard waiting. I shared the story before that when I was called to ministry, I did everything that I was supposed to do. I did everything that I was asked to do, and I still had to wait. I sat and I served for 5 years before I was officially licensed as a minister. But if I can be honest, there were times during that process when I was like, yo, maybe God isn't going to answer this prayer. Maybe God was showing me something in my dream, and it wasn't necessarily me that it was about. I honestly asked God those questions. I asked God, why, when is it going to happen? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm serving every single Sunday. I'm going to school. I'm getting the education. I'm preparing myself for the answered prayer. But it's taking a minute. And this is me sharing a real conversation that I was having with God. And I know that sometimes the waiting process gets frustrating. Some of us have been waiting for so long, and we're like, is God really going to answer? Is God even listening to me? Well, let me encourage you and let you know that he is listening, that he is going to answer your prayers. Just that some things have to line up in order for the combination of the answer prayer and you meet. There are some things that need to be worked out. Maybe there are some things in us that need to be worked out, but I guarantee you that he's going to answer your prayer. But the question remains, what do we do during the wait? Well, if you're in a position to take some notes, I have a couple of things that I want to share with you really quick. So again, if you have some paper or a pen, or maybe even you just want to record this or you want to go back to it later and listen to it, I'm going to give you some things that you can do while you're waiting on God to answer your prayer. So if you're ready, let's get to it. The first thing that we can do is to spend time fasting and praying. Fasting isn't something that we often talk about in the church context. Maybe we spend the beginning of the year talking about it. Many of our churches do the Daniel fast at the beginning of the year. But while you're waiting on God to answer, can I encourage you to fast and to pray? And you might be saying, okay, well, what am I praying about? I've already prayed and asked God for something specific. So what else do I need to ask him for? Well, pray and ask God for guidance. While you're waiting, ask God to show you what to do while you're waiting. Ask God to lead you in the right direction. Ask God to lead you to the right people that can help you in this process of waiting. Because listen, let me tell you, you're not meant to wait alone. When I was waiting to become an official licensed minister, God directed me to some people that helped me through that process of waiting. I developed some great friendships that continue to exist. But the only reason why I developed those relationships and those friendships was because I was intentionally asking God to show me who I need to connect to. So while you're waiting, spend time fasting and praying for guidance, but then also ask God for wisdom. Ask God for wisdom. And then also I would suggest that you ask God for clarity. You want you want your next move to be clear. Maybe you need some things fleshed out. Maybe you need some more information on what areas that you need to be working on while you are waiting. Ask God to give you that clarity. Also pray and ask God for strength, because listen, the road is not easy. And I'm not saying this because I'm a minister or I'm a preacher, but I'm saying this as a Christian. Sometimes it gets hard. It gets trying. So we are going to need strength for the journey. So while you are waiting, ask God to strengthen you during the wait. So one, we're going to spend time fasting and praying. But secondly, I would suggest that we spend time getting things in order. What do I mean by that? One of the first things I mean is that spend time working on yourself. If there are some issues from your past that you haven't dealt with, deal with them. While I was in my waiting process, there were some things that I had to deal with. There were some relationships that I needed to go back and adjust or fix or apologize for some things, or even forgive some people who have never apologized to me. During the season of waiting, don't just sit there and get frustrated because you're waiting, but sit there and work on yourself. Do the emotional work. Maybe you're quick-tempered and God is allowing you to go through this process because he needs you to work on that. Maybe he needs you to work on your anger issues, your trust issues, whatever those emotional issues are. Maybe, just maybe, God is allowing this process to take a little longer because he wants you to wait on those emotional things. Or maybe you need to get your finances in order. I know one of my big prayers is going to lead me into a direction where I may not work a 9-to-5 for the rest of my life. But while I'm waiting for that to happen, I need to get my finances in order. I need to get some things set up so that I can be comfortable in ministry. So maybe we need to work on ourselves. Maybe we need to work on our finances. Maybe we need to work on those emotional things that get to us. And then here's something that's key for me and that I've been working on throughout this entire time is identifying my triggers. What are those things that people can say or do that can trigger me into getting upset? During this waiting season, I would encourage you to work on those. Identify your triggers, but then also identify ways to not give in to those triggers. So, for example, if I know that someone says, that I'm never going to be anything, because that's one of my triggers. If someone says that to me, I need to, one, know that that's a trigger for me. But then at the same time, I need to know how to maneuver that statement. I can't hear that statement and automatically want to pop off, because that's not going to do me any good. But I need to be able to hear something like that and not allow myself to internalize that statement. So again, spend this time identifying your triggers, but doing the work so that you don't give in to the negative responses associated with that triggers. Third, let me go back a little bit. So while we're waiting, we want to spend time fasting and praying. And I've listed some things for us to focus on in our times of prayer. Secondly, we want to get things in order. Work on ourselves, work on ourselves, work on ourselves. I cannot fix anybody else, but I can only work on Tasha. You can only work on yourself. So spend the time that is needed to do just that. And then finally, study. If you feel that you're called to ministry, if you feel that you're called to be a teacher, if you feel that you're called to go into entrepreneurship, whatever it is, whatever that next level is, study. Prepare yourself for it. If you want to start your own business, if you want to start your own t-shirt business, look at another person who has started their own t-shirt business and they are successful and see, what did they do? Study, prepare yourselves, right? Do the research, but don't just sit idle. You cannot afford to be idle. I understand that you're waiting on God to answer, but I also understand that you cannot just sit there. There is something for you to do to prepare yourself for the next level. Again, this podcast is about growing up spiritually, growing up emotionally. It's just about growing up. And some of us, in order to get to the next level, we got to grow up. We got to spend the time that's needed to work on ourselves. We got to do the research. We got to do the work. But the Bible says that faith without works is dead. It's absolutely wonderful to have faith, right? I've been praying and asking God, and I know God is going to answer. But there's also time for me to do some work. Faith without works is dead. And let me end with this one final piece of encouragement. As you're fasting and as you're praying, as God begins to give you some clarity, as God begins to quietly reveal some things to you, can I encourage you to be obedient and do whatever it is He's telling you to do? If God is showing you that you need to work on your anger issues, can I encourage you to work on those anger issues? If God is telling you to go to therapy, can I encourage you to be obedient and go to therapy? It's crucial. It's very necessary and important that as we're fasting and as we're praying, that as God reveals those things to us that we need to do, that we take heed, be obedient, and do them. Listen, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Up Podcast. I pray that you were blessed. I pray that you were able to write down some action steps and that you would do the work that God has called you to do. While He's preparing that next level, while He's preparing you, I really do pray that you were able to get some information from this conversation that will propel you into doing the work that you need to do to get to the next level. Again, I will be back next week, next Monday, with another episode of the Grow Up Podcast. It is my plan. It is my desire to release an episode every single Monday. You can continue to listen on whatever podcast platform you listen to, but I just wanted to say thank you. Tune in again next week for another episode of the Grow Up Podcast. And until then, know that I love you with the love of the Lord, and there is absolutely nothing that you can do about it.